Like many of you, Mike's on Mike will be taking some time off for the holidays to spend time with our families and our friends. For the next 2 weeks, we'll be running a couple of podcasts that you may have already heard. We've received very, very positive comments about both of them. During Christmas week of December 25th through the 29th, we will once again air the podcast we did with former Sheriff Nat Glover as we talk about his autobiography and growing up here in Jacksonville. During the week of January 1st through the 5th, we're going to again hear from Adam Chaskin, who, as you know, is the CEO of the Jewish Community Alliance, and also Eric Mann, who's the CEO and president of the First Coast YMCA. And they're talking about the partnership they formed with a group called Together Against Hate, which is a speaker series that talks about prejudice and hatred here in the Jacksonville area. Both of these podcasts will be heard over the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, we hope you enjoy your holidays with your family and your friends. And until then, enjoy the podcasts.
Welcome to Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville. Join 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome once again to Mike's on Mike. Very happy to have you with us today, and we've got a very special program here for two reasons, actually. First, we want to announce that the Jacksonville Historical Society is partnering with Mike's on Mike as our main sponsor. We want to thank both Dr. Alan Bliss as well as the staff and the JHS donors for helping us in supporting Mike's on Mike. So once again to Alan, to the
Thank
staff,
you all.
everybody else, thank you so very, very much.
Appreciate that.
The second reason today's podcast is as special as we believe it is because we have joining us the former sheriff of Duval County in the city of Jacksonville, the Honorable Nat Glover. And Sheriff, it's great to have you with us.
Mike, great to be here. And Mike.
And Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just trying to think. No, you're not the first.
I'm glad you remembered all our names.
Yeah. I mean,
He's got a sign in front of him that says Mike.
yeah.
Before we go on, I wanted to find just something to bring with me to show you our appreciation for having you on. So with that, and this is a little inside, folks, so get Nat's book, but here are two napkins I wanted to bring you. You can take them, and
don't have to worry about any follow-up.
Well,
no, they're not cloth because I wouldn't want to spend that much money, but they're really good paper.
Well,
That's just cold.
Well,
That is
yeah.
just cold.
I thought you were incapable of going that low, Mike, but I see.
Oh, no.
I can
Lower than that. Lower than that.
Don't worry about it. We'll be
He can race to the bottom quicker than anybody we know, except for Tolbert. Tolbert is there.
Yeah, I know. I'm still working on that one. Let's start out with the simplest question I could come up with because I'm known for simple questions, which is, why did you write the book and what inspired it?
Well, actually,
We should say, by the way, as we're talking about it, it's called Striving for Justice, A Black Sheriff in the Deep South by Nathaniel Glover.
It's excellent. Incredible book.
yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because for years I have been encouraged to write about my life. I mean, when you look at a situation where my background, in fact, having arrested and all of that, and I end up being a sheriff. Just so many people thought it was worthy to be documented. Mm-hmm. And, of course, me thinking a little cynical at the time was just thinking they're trying to be complimentary, and people say things sometimes disingenuously to be complimentary. And so I held off a little longer than I should have, to be honest with you. Because when I was eventually convinced, and it was a convincing team, really, Mike Freed, Winyona Kendricks, and Walt Bucell. And these were people that I trust. And they came to me and said, look, we'll do what's necessary to get this book published. All you have to do is talk. And it was almost like a deal I couldn't refuse. But what it did do, it energized me to start writing and start talking. And to this day, I will say it's been one of my great blessings, because I just started to look at what was out there, and me recalling it, it became very, very important. And it was a couple of things that was the main message. Number one, I'll start with number one, and that was, it could be very inspirational, motivational, and encouraging for someone who might have some doubts about could they do something that they might have dreamed about, thought they can do, and that kind of thing, because that was, I think, foremost in my mind. And then the other part, striving for justice, was I wanted to talk a little bit about the disparities in the criminal justice system. And of course, I wanted to kind of leave a message there as well. And with me, myself, having had the privilege of being in law enforcement for almost 40 years, arresting people, and then being blessed with the privilege of going back to my alma mater as president, and think of the contrast there. I spent that long in law enforcement putting people in jail, people to a great degree, many of which look like me. And then I was able to go back and graduate 8 college classes at Edward Waters College, and in effect revive the college and get it back in the mainstream. And I can tell you that was another blessing. And back to the beginning of your question, I needed to tell somebody.
Boy, are we glad you did.
You know, Sheriff, yeah, if I could step in just a minute. I think in all of our opinion, and in the opinion of so many people, you will go down in history as one of Jacksonville's most significant citizens in the past century.
Bar none.
And I mean that, and I think you know I mean that very sincerely. And it's not just a belief, held by me, but held by many. And the three of us have read your book. I think Hightower says he's read it 2 or 3 times now. He has nothing else to do.
That's true.
And
Sue is very happy, by the way, that he's reading instead of bothering
and you
her.
tell you tell your life story with great grace, insight, and integrity, which is who you are, I think. And I want to ask you something about the book now. You write about Axe Handle Saturday
Yes.
In the summer of 1960. Tell us what Jacksonville was like. Take us back. What was Jacksonville like in the summer of 1960?
Well, Jacksonville was pretty much a racist city. Let me just say it the way it was. But I was kind of fortunate enough, and I call it being fortunate. I had parents who never really talked negatively about white people. And if I was going to assess the frequency when they talked about white people, I would say the reverence in which they talked about them outweighed any negative responses. So I never grew up with the sense of those bad white people, and which incidentally was somewhat surprising with some of my peers, but it wasn't like we were challenging each other. It's just that I didn't hold that. But when I was encountered after getting off work at Morrison Cafeteria that day, that morning, as we talked about in the book, there were some sit-in demonstrations going on downtown. The youth organization in the NAACP was routinely, really, doing sit-in demonstrations on Saturday morning in downtown establishments. And this morning, now, this is something that when it was happening and unfolding, I didn't know anything about, but they were scheduled to conduct a sit-in demonstration at Woolworth. And, of course, that was right across the street, kind of catty corner, from Morrison Cafeteria. And I was one of the young men who had a weekend job. I was in school, but I had a weekend job at Morrison, which was a true blessing. And working in the dish room, as a matter of fact. Well, that morning, our manager of the whole cafeteria came down to the dish room where I was working and told all of us to leave. Get out of here right now. Now, he didn't go into the detail, but he was concerned about our safety. And incidentally, all of us were black, African Americans. So he told us just drop what we were doing. And I can tell you, people just stopped and cleared out. Well, my job was consisted of a lot of things, but the last thing I was supposed to do was to mop the floor after everybody left. Now, I had permission to drop the mop and get out of there, but my work ethic wouldn't allow me to do that. So I mopped the floor before I left, which put me maybe 30 or 45 minutes behind everybody else. But when I left that morning, I walked into a mob of Ku Klux Klansmen and white supremacists, and they had axe handles and baseball bats. Now, what was kind of peculiar, I didn't see one person with the old axe handle. They were all brand new. And they quickly encircled me, and they started to hit me. And it was a police officer standing just outside of the circle where I was in the middle, and they were calling me all kind of names other than Nathaniel and actually hitting me. And so I got an opportunity to run to the officer and ask him, please help me. And he said, you better get out of here before they kill you. And I ran. And I tell you, I know that they were chasing me, but I ran, and I was so afraid because I was afraid that one of them was going to hit me in the head and I was going down, and then there were going to be a beating frenzy and they would kill me. So I ran all the way home, and when I got home, I cried. And to this day, I don't remember ever having any excruciating pain anywhere. But the reason I cried was because I was so afraid, and I had ran. And in my neighborhood, you didn't run away from a fight. If you ran away from a fight, they will call you a coward, and you would have to live with that for the rest of your life. And so that's the reason I cried so long, and I was so ashamed. And so when I stopped crying, I said to myself, and I made this pledge, that I would never run away from another fight. I would rather die before I did that, because I never wanted to feel like that again. And I can tell you the worst moment in my life, and I've referred to it as a possible contemporary lynching attempt at the time. If they had killed me, that's what it would have been. But what it did, it gave me a sense that all challenges that I was confronted with that took courage, if I walked away from it, I knew that that day will come back on how I felt. So that, in a way, encouraged me to confront whatever the challenges are, and it changed my life. So if you look at it in its quintessential sense, you could very well say it was a positive more than a negative as it relates to me. And so I survived it, but I think it made me a better person.
Well, there's no question God had another purpose for you. I mean, there was no question God had another purpose for you. And you've spent your whole life fighting for others. So, yeah, I can't imagine what you went through, but he had another purpose for you, and you did it.
Well, I appreciate you going to the spiritual side of it, because I think that was the essence of it. And I sometimes think to myself, the Lord probably said, I want to put a level of courage in you that would be second to none, but I'm going to have to work a little hard on you. So he sent me through something real difficult, and that was one. I think the Lord could have been a little more subtle, and I would have got the message. But it was quite frightening.
We won't go there and have
No.
we won't judge you. We won't judge him on that one.
Thank you, Michael.
Wow, what a powerful story! Yeah, extraordinary. And I guess it must seem like it was just yesterday.
It's always right there. And a side story, and I remember when I was delivering a speech as sheriff, and a gentleman came up to me, and he said, I would like to talk to you, please. And I told him, because at that time I had just gotten elected, and it was almost like a rock star. After speeches and that kind of thing, people would be lining up to shake my hand and that kind of thing. But this guy stood off to the side, and he waited and he waited. And after I finished shaking all of those hands, after that speech, he walked up and said he wanted to apologize. And I said to him, what did you do? He said, I was there that Saturday morning.
Wow. Golly.
Now listen.
That's got to be heavy.
Now, you get another wow when you looked in this man's eyes and he was crying. He had tears coming down. And he asked me for forgiveness. And of course, I forgave him. And to this day, maybe I should have gone into a little more detail and tell him it had been somewhat of a blessing for me, too. But I didn't, but I certainly made it clear to him that I forgive you. Now, I'm sorry that I didn't question him a little more, because when he apologized, I thought he might have been one that was in the group. But he could have been just one that was there that morning.
Just observing.
Yeah.
And step in to help you.
Yeah. But in any event, it was a moving moment.
Sheriff, can we segue into something else? that particular Saturday is not the first time you confronted that, nor the last. I'm confident of that. Tell us what it was like as a young black police officer when you were growing up, or when you were growing up in the sheriff's department, or the police department, and tell us the role that Mayor Lou Ritter played in helping you become a police officer.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to tell you about a few incidents in order to get there. I grew up in what people generally call and often call the ghettos of Jacksonville. And I always wanted to be a police officer. I used to listen to the radio programs and didn't have anything close to a TV, but kind of a side note to that, the people next door did have a TV, but they put it directly in front of their window,
So you can...
and I was able to look across and occasionally see TV program. But I listened to the radios and listened to Dragnet, Michael Sheen, Johnny Dollar, and all of that. But I wanted to be a police officer, and I wanted to be a detective. Now, at that time, there was really no, maybe they had one or two black detectives, but that was a lofty goal. And what I actually saw in my neighborhood of police officers, they would come in the neighborhood and they would visit certain houses. Now, the houses they would visit were what we call at the time moonshine houses. But they didn't take any enforcement. They would just go in and come out. Now, everybody knew they were selling moonshine. So the word was that they were taking some kind of encouragement not to do any enforcement. So I don't know about that, but it did not discourage me. So I wanted to be a police officer so badly. But I was working at Morrison Cafeteria and I got arrested after work one night. And the reason I got arrested was that the police had Morrison staked out. Apparently, the cafeteria had complained about some of the employees stealing steaks, the sirloin steaks. And they were searching everybody leaving the cafeteria that night. Well, when I came out, it was maybe 10 o'clock. They searched me, and I had 2 napkins in my pocket. Mike got the number right at the beginning of this conversation.
Mike Miller did that,
Mike,
not Hightower.
Yeah, not Mike Hightower. Mike
or
Miller.
Tolbert. Or Tolbert.
Yeah, Tolbert. But I had the 2 napkins in my pocket, and when the detectives searched me, they found the napkins, and they said, if you don't tell us who's stealing these steaks, we're going to put you in jail for these napkins. Now, first, I didn't believe that. And secondly, I didn't know who was stealing the steaks. The only steaks I saw usually were half eaten, and because I worked in the dish room, so I didn't even have access to steaks. But they arrested me for that. And I had a young man with me. He was a juvenile at the time. He was arrested as well, but he was sheltered. I went to jail. And all of this was such an adventure. I remember even when I was in jail, I was insulted because I'm sitting there in jail wondering what I'm going to do, call my mother, who had already said, if any of us ever got in jail, don't call her. She going to leave us down there to do the time, I guess. And I know I didn't
Mama's
want to.
love.
Nothing like it.
I didn't want to call her, but I'm sitting there, and the guys in jail, they're just bragging about their, criminal prowess. I mean, had one guy talking about how many houses he broke in, another guy talking about how many robberies he made and he had committed, and another guy talking about how many cars he stole. And I was sitting there with my head down, hoping they didn't ask me anything.
2 napkins.
Thank you, Mike. You're so helpful. but
This is Mike Miller's last.
yeah, yes.
It's going to be 2 mics on Mike after this.
Yeah. So I was, and they asked me, "Hey, buddy, what did you steal? What did you do?" So I tried to blow it up a little. I said, larceny. That worked for a minute until he said, "What did you steal?" So I tried to whisper 2 napkins, and they just all did the same thing my interviewers are doing. They just all just laughed. He calling the other guys down the block. "We got a guy in here stole 2 napkins." But it was a total humiliation. But
Let's clarify now why you had the napkins in your pocket, because you didn't steal them.
no, it wasn't the intent to steal. I had the napkins in my pocket because we would use the napkins as handkerchiefs because it was so hot in the dish room. Right. And glad you asked that, because the next morning when I went to court, the manager of the cafeteria came down and testified on my behalf. And
Same man who told you to get out.
No, that wasn't it was my supervisor.
Right.
See, the person that told us to leave was over the whole cafeteria, but he did testify. But to get to the point where I had to eventually make the call to my home, my odds were good because I had my 2 sisters there, my brother, my father, and my mother. So I thought, well, maybe somebody else will answer the phone. Didn't work. She answered. But she never said anything but told my father to come down and get me out of jail. And he did. But the good thing about that, Mike, when he came down, got me out of jail, to this day, neither my mother or my father asked me, did I steal those napkins? And in addition to that, I had to go to court the next day. Judge John Santora was the judge. And when I showed up, had to go to court the next day, I had standing alongside me my father's boss, he called him, boss man, who was white, and my supervisor, who was white. And they all testified on my behalf. Now, some police officers had already told my father to tell me to plead guilty, and they assured him that nothing would happen. And my father told me to plead guilty, and I did plead guilty. And after my father's boss testified on my family, and my boss testified about me and the circumstances of the napkins, and it wasn't an unusual thing for people who work in this room to have a napkin in their pocket, using it as a handkerchief. The judge discharged the case. So I was always grateful to Judge Santora too. So I had 3 white people standing up there testifying on my behalf, and the case was discharged. Now, I went for years thinking that me having pleaded guilty, I was convicted of that crime, until I found out later that he had discharged it, and the records were sealed later on. Incidentally, I didn't get them records sealed until later when Hank Cox was the state attorney, and he walked up to me one day in court. I was in court on another case, and said he was just going to walk through the process as an attorney and get my record sealed, and that's what he did.
And then to Mike's point, how Lou Ritter then, how that came.
Well, when I actually, to go back, actually when I got ready to apply to become a police officer, after everybody told me it was no point in me applying, because if you've been arrested, they just don't hire people who've been arrested. And but for whatever reason, I said I was going to try anyway, and I applied. Now, this is after I had graduated from college, and I was thinking that the college degree will make a difference, because at that time you could become a police officer with a high school degree or a GED, and so it looked like that nothing was going to happen though, because when I applied, nothing really happened until one day my brother called me, and he said, who incidentally he was the manager at the black folk pool on 4th and Jefferson, told me to come down. He wanted me to meet somebody, and when I went down there, he wanted me to meet an officer by the name of Marvin Young, who was an African American officer. And the thing about Marvin Young was he was one of those African Americans who were able to speak extremely well, and some would call even proper, and some would use the term, he tried to talk like white folk, and so he was just one of those individuals. And my brother told him my story, that I was trying to become a police officer. He asked me about the situation. I went over the details of the situation, and he said, "Oh my goodness, that's hard to believe." And then he said to me, standing right there after I explained that to him, that we need to go see the mayor. And I didn't have too much confidence in that, but I mean, you don't just go see the mayor. And I said, "Oh, okay, when you want to get together?" He said, "Get together? We're going right now." So, I didn't think I was dressed properly or anything. So I said, okay. But again, my cynical nature kicked in. So I'm trying to do what my brother told me to do. He was my older brother. And I said, okay, to myself, we just go ahead and get this over with. And we went downtown and went to City Hall, got on the elevator, went up, and I'm just in tow. I'm right behind him, trying to make sure we check this box. And so I can tell my brother I did what you told me to do. And when Marvin Young walked in that office, the secretary jumped up and said, hey, Marvin, how's the children? And then start calling the children names. I said, oh, my God, we own to something here. and we were, because Marvin took me in there, and I talked to the mayor, told him my situation, and all I can hear Marvin keep saying is he's a college graduate, too. He just graduated from college and that kind of thing. And the mayor called me over. He said a few things to me. And then I left. And I really didn't think, the mayor was going to do much about it. But I learned later that the mayor went down to the civil service administration building and told the administrator that he wanted Nathaniel Glover to take the test to become a police officer. And she said, we saw his application, and we have looked at it, and we know he's a college graduate and all of that, but we do not hire people who've been in jail. As simple as that. And oh, by the way, Mr. Mayor, I do not work for the mayor's office. I work for the Civil Service Board. They had I think a 5-member board then. And the mayor told her, by the way, I'm looking at appointing some new Civil Service Board members.
It's good to be king, isn't it?
Yeah. And he turned around and walked off. And Nathaniel Glover got called down to take the test.
That's a great
and incidentally ended up being a historic sheriff, not in just Jacksonville, but Florida, and later inducted into the Law Enforcement Hall of Fame.
I have a question for you, but it's in two parts. So first, we want to talk about you were on the forefront of Mayor John Payton's Jacksonville journey, which everyone says was successful, and it made Jacksonville safer. And you were a part of all that. And, of course, it was the death of that young woman that affected you and John Payton so deeply. But before that, put this as Mike Miller now has said twice, that you were a candidate for mayor, and it was against John Payton. It was a very tough campaign, which you can talk about, but John Payton won, and of course that was a disappointment to you and your family and your donors. But he called you shortly thereafter. Can you just real quickly kind of talk about the call that he made, how that affected you, and then how that transition of why you then went to the Jacksonville journey?
Well, actually, I have to say, one of the great Mikes were the campaign manager for that victory, and I wanted to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge John Payton, because we did run a campaign that was quite competitive. After losing, I, of course, said in my concession speech that I believe, and I still believe that today, that the people usually get it right, and that I wanted to congratulate the new mayor, and I want to make certain he understands that I want to be there to assist in any way possible. And I didn't realize, nor did I know or even expect a call the next day. And he called and actually invited me to be a co-chair on his transition team. And I was quite explicit. I couldn't believe he was asking me that. I knew I had to say what I had to say in my concession speech, but he wasn't supposed to take that literally. So I mean, that's what all candidates usually say. You know? But it was he did and was so sincere about it. And I'll tell you, when I talk about courage, I talk about John Payton and what he was able to do, because when he did that, he had some of his supporters who was so much against that, they picketed his office. And they felt like, hey, we won this thing and we won it fairly and squarely. And to bring him on was kind of I guess a slap in some of them face. But he stayed true, and I, along with Walt Bussell, co-chaired his campaign transition. And what many people don't know, Walt had agreed to chair my transition. And he went to him and cut the deal with Walt that if he won, you know, he would like him to be on his transition team, and Walt agreed to that. So two great people coming together, but and it was one of my greatest experience.
Before you talk about the Jacksonville journey, I just want you all to know, and I say this with a great deal of respect, during those times and that difficult conversations that some of those people on John Payton's stand, Mike Tolbert was one of those people that said to John Payton, it's time to bring this city together. This is what you've got to do. You've got to bring the city together. And I give kudos to because Mike Tolbert, he made it real clear to John Payton and some of those people, I'll clean it up. He basically told him to pound sand. I can tell you that.
Well, I can tell you.
I cleaned that up for Mike Tolbert.
I've always had great admiration for Mike as well, because if you all remember, during that heated campaign, someone sprayed some spray paint on my campaign headquarters that said, "No in mayor." And it was awful. And as a side note, I can remember that Saturday morning I was standing up, looking up at it, and there was somebody standing next to me, and I can't remember who it was. And all of us in shock. And I said to the person next to me, "Who do you think they're talking about?" He was quite emphatic in telling me who they were talking.
You know, just as a side note on
Are
that.
you sure we've got?
Go ahead,
Are
Talbot.
you sure we've got Sheriff Glover or Chris Ross?
No slap in the face.
No,
if it's
no,
Chris
no,
Rock.
no,
No slap in the face.
But you know, on that point, just to show again how though it was competitive, everything like that, and you write about it in the book, is how appalled our campaign was about that. And as you remember, put in your book that John Payton, the campaign, put in $25,000 reward to help find out who did it. That was, let me tell you, that was real money too.
Well, I know, but it just demonstrated who he was.
Yes,
and I'll always have the greatest respect for him, and it really turned out to be awesome. And I often talk about the tactic that the wisdom of his campaign. People who said, I think that was some of Nat's supporters who did that. They quarterback.
That was Tolbert putting his
I'm
spin on it.
not calling any names. But anyway, it turned out to be a great thing, and it was the example of what Jacksonville is all about.
And it now transcends you to the Jacksonville journey, which is what you and John Payton did.
Yeah, we had some challenges here in Jacksonville because crime had spiked big time, and we had to address it. And of course, it was kind of a delicate thing for the mayor to wade in when you're talking about crime, because of course, that's the sheriff domain, and so we had to come up with something that would address the crime, but also make certain we maintain the harmony with the sheriff's office and all. And we came up with the Jacksonville Journey. And the Jacksonville Journey was an initiative that addressed crime in the area, and we addressed crime prevention, crime intervention, addressed the needs of the sheriff's office, in addition to college education for and that kind of thing. So, because one of the things you see in law enforcement, you don't see a whole lot of people who have college degrees and all of that being arrested. So we even addressed that in it, and it turned out to be huge, because it did have the positive results that we had. But not only that, when I sat at the table and I looked around at the people that was involved in pulling that journey together, we had the most influential people in this city, barring none. And it turned out to be a great success. And to this day, I do not know how the politics got involved to the point that we are not still working on that particular program, because I do believe if we had sustained it, we would have been in pretty darn good shape as it comes to crime in this city.
What about today? Will it work today?
I think it would work today, but one of the things that you have to make certain of is when you're talking about, and I teach this in my leadership presentations, when you're talking about addressing an issue, you have levels of addressing. Sometimes you do it for just to be able to say you did it. Sometimes you do it to check a box, because it's when you send in requests for certain things, that box have to be checked. But then when you do it and actually put effort in it, create a culture to everyone that's working with it, that they are serious about it, then the results is totally different. And that's what the Jacksonville Journey was about.
Mike Tolbert, you got a couple of questions I know that you want to
Yes,
ask.
sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I do, Sheriff. I got to believe that your phone and email probably blows up every day with requests that you speak out on something, you take a stand for something, you do something for the community. And I know recently that happened in the last mayor's race, and for the first time in my memory, you came out and made a political statement about in that mayor's race. And I'm wondering what caused you to speak up.
Well, that's a good question, and you posed it perfectly, because there had to be some compelling reason for me to do that. When I was elected sheriff, if you remember, I was elected in the first primary, and I was elected with a broad base of supporters. And I am talking white, black, I'm talking Republicans, Democrats, Southsiders, Northsiders, and all of
Ortega.
that. And Ortega. And after I got elected, I made the commitment at that time that we are a city together, and this city comes together and try to do the right thing. And I and I made another pledge to myself. I am not going to let the citizens of Jacksonville down because I'm just too appreciative of what they did. And you're talking about me having worked with John Payton. You talk about me having worked with John Delaney. And you're talking about the great redeeming value of having done that. And it was because we were working together. So I would never get involved in races. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't. I had to tell some of my friends, good friends, that I do not endorse candidates. And that was, in a lot of instances, to people, they were upset about that. But I kept that rule. But when we started talking in the campaign and the rhetoric got divisive and people were so upset about it, again, a number of people came to me and said I needed to do something about it. And of course, I was joking about how many people you had to pass by to come to me, to get to me, to put this on me. They said, you are the only one in this city that people will listen to. And I just didn't want to do that because I was very, very good friend of Daniel Davis, and Donna Deacon was my neighbor at the beach. And so it was, I just can't do it. And they would not let it go. And to be honest with you, I won't take the liberty of calling anybody's name, but I had one of the most prominent ministers in the city call me one night, and he was at the point of tears. And he talked to me about, 15 or 20 minutes, saying that you have to do it. You can't walk away from this. And so I went back and told the group that I will do it. And to this day, after running that video, I feel good about it. And I feel like I would have been a person who would have been walking around with a weight around their neck if I hadn't done it. But I also had the challenge of, I knew I was going to make some of my very good friends upset. But every one of my friends that was on, let me be honest with you, the Republican side, every one of them came up to me and said it was the right thing to do. I've never seen anything like that, anybody having the courage to do that, and they were glad I did it. And that was a weight lifted off my shoulder because I thought I was going against some people who had helped me along the way. And when I was president of Edward Waters College, I had a whole lot of people come to my aid, and I thought they were going to be upset. None of them were.
Yep. I've got to ask you a really personal question about that. Did you give a heads up to anybody before you recorded that spot? Did you call anybody from either side of the political aisle and said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is why I'm doing it?
Yes, I did. I called the sheriff, and I called my friend Daniel Davis, and I told him.
May I ask
both of
what
them.
the responses were?
Well, the response were not hurry up and get it done. But the responses were pretty much what I had expected, because it was going to come out, knowing what the spot was, it was going to come out like I was endorsing a candidate.
And you did
And
not.
I tried to tell them that I was not endorsing any candidate. And the focus of the video will be addressing the divisiveness. And so it turned out to be something that caused me some concern, but I'm okay with it, and I think my subsequent conversation with both of them have been very, very good.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap things
Well,
up.
I got one. Just
Okay,
real
each of
quick,
you have one
real quick,
question. Go
real
ahead.
quick.
Real quick.
On that note, the second to the last sentence in your book is you make the statement, "We're better than this." This book was written before that situation.
Yes,
That's really what you were saying
yes,
about?
yes.
And in looking back, when you read the book, we're better than this.
We are.
Never forget that.
And we are better than this. And I'm going to tell you this, and I believe this to my core, that when we get past this toxic environment that we are in, we're going to be even better.
Well, as Grandma used to say, from your lips to God's ears.
Well, we're going to get there because we got people like you going to.
Tolbert, you got a final question we can
Yep.
ask the sheriff?
Come on.
No, I
Okay.
don't. I'm like everybody else. I'm in awe of this man, and I know some personal times that when he has acted courageously, and it always comes from his heart. And my request, Sheriff, would be that you just keep doing whatever your heart tells you to do, because it's always been right.
Thank you.
Question about it.
Thank you.
Just for
Thank
and
you
here's
for
the
being with
book.
us.
Here's our book.
Yep. And
Striving for Justice, a Black Sheriff in the Deep South.
And by the-
Nathaniel Glover.
you can buy the book at a lot of bookstores. I went to the one in San Marco because I heard they had signed books there, so I bought mine from there. You can get it there as well. If you also have a book that has not been signed, you can meet the sheriff and have it signed yourself. He's going to be appearing at the Jacksonville Historical Society, our sponsor of this program, on September the 6th between 5:30 in the afternoon at the Old St. Andrew's Church. So come
Thank
on
you.
by, bring your book, have it signed. I'm sure they'll have books there for sale as well if you don't have one yourself. But we wish you the very best of luck. I can't wait for the movie. I think it's going to be terrific. And Chris Rock is not going to be the one who's going to be
It's got to be Denzel Washington.
Absolutely.
Denzel Washington.
I'd love it. Thank you, Sheriff, so very
Thank you, my
much.
friend.
Thank you. And I
Great to see you.
enjoyed it so much. Yeah.
Thank
That
you.
does it for this episode of Mike's on Mike. Thank you once again for joining us today. You can catch us always on Facebook, on YouTube, on Spotify, just wherever else you find your podcast. And we thank you very much for joining us. And once again, thank you to the Jacksonville Historical Society
thank you.
for bringing it to us. Thank you all. Have a good week, and we'll see you
You'll
next
take
week.
care. Thank you. Bye.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and Mike Miller can be found at your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook and YouTube. Learn more at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversations with Mike's on Mike.